Prologue, Mark Phillips, The Anchor Demon, read by Matthew Anson. The year was 1719, January 17th. Captain Philip, Mark Philip, commanded the prow of the Wraith. The frigate glided over the calm surface of the open sea, menacing any within its sight with its 50 guns loaded on the main deck and gun deck. Captain Philip was sailing the Spanish Main, Hungary, to intercept the oncoming trade ships containing treasure to satisfy his greed. Few crossed him, and few managed to escape his path. Even pirates would flee at the sight of his Jolly Roger. This fear was his greatest weapon, something he had learned from the recently deceased Blackbeard, who had set his beard aflame to create an image of a demon spawned from hell. Mark was the anchor demon, dressed in his high-collared raincoat with a tricorn hat. His face was covered, but for the piercing glare of his 2 eyes, the glare of a monster. However, the thing that terrified people the most, buccaneers and privateers alike, was the mammoth anchor chained to his back. In battle, he had wrapped the chain around his right arm and wielded the anchor, the size of his torso, as a deadly flail. Mark was trained and experienced. He had mastered how to wield it flawlessly and used momentum to reduce exertion. He had fondly remembered a time when he had attacked a small trading vessel, who had drawn flintlock and cutlass after the mast had fallen to a chain shot of a well-aimed volley. When he had seen their bravery, he had told his men to wait on the Wraith. He jumped off the main deck and onto theirs. They backed away from him as he flung the anchor from his back. Within minutes, the numbers had reduced to half as the anchor sailed through the air before slamming down, and often through pieces of a ship or crew. Surrender had been swift. "Ship sighted! On the starboard side!" came a cry from the crow's nest. Mark looked to the starboard with a scope to see Spanish Galleon in the distance. He estimated it had a number of guns, and judging by its course, it had taken no regard of his flag. If it had, then they were probably hunting him. Piracy was forbidden. As a boy, he remembered his father telling him tales when Port Royal had been a pirate haven, where booze and women flowed freely, and its proximity to the trade routes had made it a perfect resting point. Sadly, the people were elected for law and order rather than pleasure and chaos.
"All hands on deck, make sail, make ready!"
Mark yelled as the deck sprang into life with crew unfurling the main sails and loading cannon. He made his way to helmsman, a figure of calm amongst the storm, motioning to aim for the enemy along the larboard side. He watched as the cannons were loaded and moved in position. The ship came within firing range shortly, but no one dared to fire until the captain ordered. The enemy galleon fired a barrage of shot that peppered the deck of the Wraith, throwing members of the crew overboard and throwing a cannon with him.
"Fire!"
The batteries roared as the power ignited, sending iron balls whistling through the air to come slamming into the enemy galleon. The enemy galleon turned so that it was facing Philip's broadside head-on. He was perplexed by this. Yes, it reduced the damage one would receive from weapons, but it was pointless if both ships were evenly matched. If anything, they were preparing to board. He spoke to the helmsman, telling him to pull their vessel along the larboard.
"Grab cutlass and pistol, prepare to board. Larboard, belay that, steady."
The intention was to fire one final volley into the enemy at point-blank range, inflicting maximum damage before the buccaneers charged across, killing any Spaniard they came upon. As the crafts approached one another, the sails were hoisted and tension rose. Both crews were sizing each other up, and one thing was obvious: the Spanish had brought a lot more soldiers with them. They had been hiding below the deck before the opening hatches and storming onto the rails. The gun deck and main deck prepared to fire their cannons, as did the Wraiths. Mark didn't like that. The damage would be too extensive, not to mention expensive. Power roared, pistols screamed, cutlass crashed with one another as the chaos erupted, an orchestra of war. Mark charged forwards, unravelling a heavy chain round his body. He wrapped it around his arm and held the anchor by the handle he had specially built into it. Throwing the deadly metal forwards, he watched with joy as it smashed into the railing and took out a soldier climbing it. The chain ran out of slack, and Mark felt a fearsome tug on his arm as the anchor ceased moving. Within a moment, he whipped it overhead so it would return to him. A Spanish musketeer, who had clambered aboard the Wraith, charged towards him, bayonet aimed viciously towards his face. The great weapon wouldn't reach the captain in time, so using his free arm, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his flintlock pistol. His opponent could have only been 18, a novice of a soldier, judging by his appearance. However, his face changed from triumph to resignation when he saw the weapon. The pistol swiveled round to his face and fired, killing him instantly. Taken up by the moment, Mark had failed to notice the anchor was still in flight. Too late, he realised that his timing was off and the anchor was going to drag him backwards. Suddenly, his greatest weapon had betrayed him, and that one traitorous movement would be his downfall. It flew over the other side of the ship and sank into the sea. The chain tightened round his arm, crushing his bones. He fought against the pull, but it was no use. His old friend was now dragging him to Davy Jones's locker. The railing collided with his chest. Not even that could stop him. He toppled forwards, over the rail. In his last moments, he remembered the sea rushing towards him, and the darkness enveloping him.